I like to look for new, out-of-the-way fishing holes. If I'm on a trip and have my gear, I'll pull up a map, look at the different connecting waterways, and try to find back roads that may lead to spots that few people know about. On one trip about 10 years ago, I'm in western PA and I'm looking for a road to connect me with this small and out-of-the-way stream that I found on the map. I'm in the country, it's not too desolate, but houses are definitely getting farther and farther apart and looking more and more beat up. I surmise that I'm really close to where this stream is supposed to be, so I turn down a dirt road that leads toward a tree line in the direction I believe this stream to be. The road starts out in okay shape, but as soon as I pass into the tree line, stuff gets weird. It's mid-afternoon, but the canopy of trees is so thick that it suddenly looks like dusk. Then the road very quickly deteriorates, starts to close in, and then starts to vanish. There are banks on either side of me, so I figure I'm on some sort of old logging road that rarely if ever gets vehicles on it anymore. The road is getting worse and worse. Large rocks start appearing at random spots in the road, first sporadically and then more frequently. It's very unnatural looking. It looks like they were placed on purpose. My car is four-wheel drive, but I'm getting a little worried because the rocks are getting larger, and combine this with how tight the road now is and driving around them is becoming sketchy. I'm now driving very slow to not pop a tire or make a wrong move and get stuck on the bank or something. The road suddenly takes a very sharp left-hand and downward turn. I creep along this turn but stop as I see the road continuing this weird downward trajectory. At this moment, my gut starts talking to me and telling me to turn around, but it's at this point I realize I can't. The road is not wide enough to do a three-point turn. I could chance it, but I didn't want to get my front end caught on something pushing over the bank or my back end going off the back in the other direction and getting stuck. I say to myself, keep pushing forward and you are bound to get just enough room to turn around shortly. As I make my way driving this weird, downward road with sharp curves and oddly placed rocks, I start to see items off to the sides of the road. At first it's just garbage. Bottles, boxes, wrappers, etc. Then I start seeing toys, kids' toys, lots of them. An uncomfortable amount. Then I start seeing clothes. Some look old and weathered like they've been there for years, and some look fairly new. The amount of clothes I'm seeing also increases. Then I start seeing mattresses. Not one random mattress. Lots of mattresses, all over the place. There are dirty and dark stains on them. My gut is now screaming at me to GTFO, but I still don't have room to turn around. While I'm sitting there and trying to figure out my next move, I get that distinct feeling that I'm being watched. The moment that feeling hits me, I audibly yell at myself, "Nope." Then I slam the car in reverse and drive reverse, dodging all of the random rocks and all the way back up and out the sharp turns until the path levels out again. I go full "screw this" mode and risk making the three-point turn. My back end goes slightly off the bank, and I slam back into drive and pound the gas to throw myself back onto the road and out of whatever dark woods nonsense I had discovered. A few years ago, I went out for a nice evening of fishing in the northern parts of Sweden. I am what I guess is called a fishing supervisor. I checked that the other fishermen got their licenses at a certain area of lakes and streams. This is in late summer, and I have been doing my round, which I usually end with going to a small lake and fly fish for some trout. This lake or pond is pretty deep in the forest, and I rarely meet someone there. Actually, I've never met someone there. This lake looks kind of like a crater. A perfect round circle that's perhaps 100 meters in diameter. It contains a natural population of perch and trout. It's a warm summer evening with a slight breeze, the birds are chirping, and the fish is rising to all the insects spawning on the surface. I rate my gear and aim for one of the fish rising to the right of me. The same second as my fly lands on the surface, it is like someone pauses the time. The sun hides behind a cloud, the wind stops blowing, the birds are suddenly silent, and the fish stops eating. A smell rises from the ground I'm standing on. It smells like something dead, something rotten. Like I have a carcass buried under my feet. All of a sudden I am aware there is something walking out of the forest behind me, maybe 10-15 meters behind me. It's like I can see it in the corner of my eye, but I still really can't see it. Every hair on my body is on its end, and it is suddenly very cold around me. The thing watching me just stands there, and I don't have the courage to turn around at all. I see my fly sink to the bottom, but I can't move. I can't do anything about it because I don't dare to move. Then the wind hits me, and it carries the awful smell away. The sun hits me again. A bird is singing somewhere in the forest and the almost overtaking feeling of being watched lets go of me. I turn around and there is nothing there. On the lake, the fish starts rising again. I pack my gear and throw the backpack on my back and run for it. Through the forest to my car. I hit the gas and drive like a maniac until I find the big road and civilization again. I park at the side of the road and say to myself, what the hell was that? My heart is still racing. I haven't visited this lake since this happened, and I know no one else who has either. I've never really had paranormal experiences, but I cannot explain this. I'm in college and me and some other 7 people from my school went on a backpacking trip, and we had 2 experienced leaders. We drove to Zaleski State Forest, which is in the Appalachian region of Ohio. It was early April this year, and it was cold and everything was still dead from winter. After hiking miles into the forest, we set up camp at the backpacking campsite, and there were a couple other groups of people as well. A few of them were friendly older couples, and then 2 college-aged girls. Everyone was pretty spread out from each other. We set up camp farther away from everyone else. I have always been able to sense energies of places, and the energy in this area wasn't great. It was almost spooky. Each of us had individual, one-person tents, and we formed kind of a cluster in this site, with my tent being in the back, so no one was behind me. Our cluster was also right next to the forest, because this backpacking site was like a big cleared-off square in the middle of the trees. Fast forward, I'm dead asleep around 2 a.m., and I wake up to leaves crunching right behind my tent. I hear footsteps walking in circles around my tent. They had a sort of heaviness to them that couldn't be a deer or a dog. Also, it sounded like just 2 legs. I cannot make this up. This creature was circling my tent for long periods of time, slowly creeping up to the sides of my tent, and then just stopping for periods of time, and then would move on to waking around the rest of our tent cluster. I could hear a human-like breathing from the mouth when it was close to my tent, like a light sort of heaving. I was shaking, too scared to unzip my tent and investigate. I kid you not, this occurred for hours, and it seemed I was the only one awake. Out of nowhere, I see an illuminated light shape from my tent, although I couldn't tell what it was from inside my tent, because it was all zipped up. It was like a warm glow, and it didn't move like a flashlight would. I was paralyzed in fear. I simply couldn't believe it was an animal. At some point, I fell asleep due to sheer exhaustion, but I could hear the heavy footsteps circling until I did. In the morning, I questioned my fellow campers about it, and my leader admitted she heard the footsteps and noises as well, admitting it was bizarre and she would have investigated had she not been so groggy. One of the boys in the group said he also noticed the light that came on, but thought it was someone else. Not a single person in this group went up to go to the bathroom or turned on a light that night. I've heard things about the Appalachian regions being creepy and bizarre, and now I believe it. Some people on Reddit have leaned towards Bigfoot because apparently he is associated with light orbs. Never been a Bigfoot believer, but I'm telling you, this didn't feel like just any animal like a bear. I went out rock hounding solo today to a place my husband and I have gone before. Everything seemed normal when I arrived. It's a very secluded area of the creek with a rock bar in the middle of the creek and with a small patch of woods to the left and a dense forest on the right. I crossed the creek and set up on my gear on the rock bar, grabbed a bag and started walking up creek. About 4 to 5 minutes and I kept looking up at the forest. I don't know why, but I just kept getting an eerie feeling. Every now and again I'd hear a couple of thumps out there, but you know, nature, so I didn't think anything of it. About an hour and I heard my first meow. I was so focused on pulling clay that I literally stood up and was like, I did not just hear a cat meow, did I? 10 minutes go by and I'm walking further up creek and damn if I didn't hear it again. I stopped and was like, yep, I just heard a cat meow, how strange, but like, something seemed really off, and I started to feel uneasy, so I turned around and headed back to my site. Something about the meow wasn't right. It wasn't a painful meow, but just like a matter-of-fact meow, if that makes sense. About 5 minutes into the trek back I definitely hear a meow, and I'm sweating like crazy because of the heat, but instantly feel cold, clammy, and the hair is standing up on the back of my neck. I know what I was supposed to be hearing, a single meow, but it wasn't coming from a cat. It sounded like someone or something imitating a meow. I keep focused on getting back to my site, and about 5 minutes later, another single meow. Here's where I realize things are getting really weird. The meow always sounded the same distance from me no matter how far I kept walking. I finally reach my site and pull out my drinks and plop down to rehydrate. That's when another meow sounded, and this time, I knew with everything in me that that was not a cat following me. I calmly gathered up my gear and started to trek across the creek to the path to my car. And another meow. I made my way across the creek and hunched down in a pit. I parked my car right next to the edge of the forest and was really starting to lose my crap. I get my keys and mace out and put my gear on me so I can dive into my car and rearrange later. And that's exactly what I did. Nearly crapped myself, finding the courage to make it to my car, but I did, and I hightailed it out of there fast. This took place a few years ago in a small city in Alaska where I grew up. One night at approximately 12 a.m. to 2 a.m., honestly so long ago I can't recall exactly, I am a very light sleeper and often have trouble falling asleep. At about that time I started hearing what sounded like an obnoxious mix of possibly a clarinet or trumpet playing loud screeches. No harmony, just squeaks and honks in the cold night air. I sat for a while on my bed. I couldn't sleep, it was loud enough for me to hear inside. I went out the front door and stood on the porch and just listened. It sounded like whoever was playing it was a few blocks away, but at the same time as you could hear it in every direction. It was autumn and very cold at the time. I was so frustrated by the screeching and late hour, I actually yelled out, "Shut the hell up," thinking it was a kid playing a prank. About a year or two later, when I had almost forgotten about it, I heard the sound again, this time in the daytime in the winter air. It lasted a few hours and quit. It wasn't until probably 5 years after that I watched a video on YouTube about trumpets in the sky, people around the world hearing the exact same noises. It gave me chills. Thank you for sticking with us for all 5 stories. This is the first of hopefully many videos. Please consider leaving a like or comment if you love this content so more people see it. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see this type of content in the future. I intend to post a new video at least once a week, if not more. I hope to see you again, and always remember, darkness lurks in many places.